Welcome, everybody, to the Moscow Board of Adjustments meeting. It is Monday, October 28th, 2024. Our first order of business is approval of minutes from last week on October 22nd. I didn't see any scriveners. Did anybody have comments regarding those minutes?
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a tie for a motion for second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? It is unanimously passed. Our second order of business is public comment for anybody in our audience who would care to talk about anything other than what is on our agenda. Seeing none, that item is over, and we are on to our public hearing.
Good evening, everyone. Before you tonight, we have a proposal to amend an existing conditional use permit. This is off of Hardin Road, and it is for an RV storage facility. The applicant's proposing to expand an existing RV storage facility located at 1346 Hardin Road. It's to include approximately an additional 6 acres and 154 RV storage spaces. Subject property is located within the area of city impact, and per City of Moscow's area of city impact agreement with Latah County, the Board of Adjustment is to conduct one hearing and forward a recommendation onto Latah County. So tonight you won't be approving or denying anything. You will just be making a recommendation to the county. So to provide a little bit of background, some of you might recall in January of 2020, received an application to construct an RV storage facility on about 3 acres of a portion of a property that's about 16.64 acres in size, again, in the area of impact. The Board of Adjustment for the City of Moscow put forth a recommendation at that time to Latah County of approval. And the application was approved by Latah County Commissioners, and the construction of the RV storage site was completed in 2020. The area is gravelled, partially fenced, and accessed via a gate. The facility contains various sizes of RV storage spaces ranging from 10 feet by 20 to 15 feet by 50 feet in size. This is a subject property. If any of you have driven out north of town on Mix Road, you might have noticed out on the western side, just west of Mix Road, south of Hardin Road, and east of Farm Road is the subject property. As you can see, the section that's already developed is here. And so the remainder of the parcel is what we're here to discuss tonight. Here's a better graphic of that. So this is the existing that was developed in 2020. And tonight the applicant is proposing some additional spaces along the perimeter, just adjacent to the existing development. So the subject property is 16.64 acres located just outside the city limits near the intersection of Hardin and Farm Road. Subject property contains 3-acre RV storage facility at the moment. The remainder is currently undeveloped. All parcels directly to the north are also owned by the applicant. Avista Utilities owns a small parcel to the northwest of the subject property. Property directly to the east is a 3.5-acre residential property, contains a single-family home. And there are 3 properties adjacent to the south. The first is a 15.5-acre undeveloped parcel owned by the University of Idaho. The second is a parcel owned by KRPL Radio and contains an antenna tower. And the last is a vacant parcel, I believe associated with the single-family home adjacent to it. The site has approximately 900 feet of frontage on Hardin Road and approximately 390 feet of frontage along Farm Road. This is a street view of the current entrance of the RV park, or the RV storage facility. So you can see there's a gate across here. This is the approach just off of Hardin Road. So this is a photo of the proposed site plan, like we talked about, the existing area already developed. The applicant's proposing a row just adjacent here to the north and a small row here. Again, wrapping around the sides that it's already developed. And 2 additional rows here to the east, and then a few additional rows here. Again, the zoning for this property is ag forest. The subject properties and adjacent properties to the north, south, east, and west are currently all zoned ag forestry. Within the area of impact, the county's ag forest zone has been adopted. According to Latah County Zoning Code, the ag forest district is established to achieve the purposes of this ordinance and by the goals and policies of Latah County Comprehensive Plan by accommodating, providing opportunities for, and the continuation of agriculture and forest lands. Uses allowed in the zone include those that are integral to agriculture and forestry, uses which will not conflict with accepted farm and forest practices, and uses which will not result in the excessive conversion of productive farmland and forest land to uses which can be more appropriately located in other zoning designations and which are consistent with Idaho's Agricultural Protection Act. The RV storage facilities within Ag Forest Zoning District in Latah County require a conditional use permit. So that's what brings us here tonight. According to the City of Moscow's comprehensive plan, the land use designation growth map designates the subject property as auto urban residential. Auto urban residential designated areas contain predominantly single-family homes detached on lots ranging from 7,000 to 11,000 square feet in size that are more isolated from the surrounding uses, which may require residents to rely more on automobile transportation. This designation includes those areas generally anticipated to be developed for low to moderate density residential uses and densities between 3 and 6 units per acre, which would include a mix of detached single-family homes, twin homes, townhomes, residential dwellings. Appropriate current zoning for auto urban residential designated areas are low density R1, moderate density single-family R2, and medium density residential R3 in order to include a mixture of attached or detached dwellings where appropriate. The 2019 City of Moscow Comprehensive Plan identifies Hardin Road as a proposed minor arterial. Again, conceptual site plan, just kind of with an overlay of the actual topography of the site. So the proposed development before you tonight includes an additional 6 acres of the surrounding 3-acre area that's already developed. These new spaces would be accessed via the existing entrance along Hardin Road. All travel aisles within the proposed facility will be 24 feet wide as required. The portion of the site where the new development is proposed does prevent some topographical challenges. For this reason, staff is recommending that the applicant provide a grading plan satisfactory to meet Latah County Planning and Building Department prior to permits. And the steepest portion of the parcel to the east is to remain undeveloped. So I go back just one slide. So this section here, it does have the steepest slope. He is proposing that this remain undeveloped.
Is he the applicant? You said he.
Yes, the applicant. So streets and access, subject properties access off Hardin Road, 25-foot wide paved road. The road is paved. There are no existing sidewalks, curbs, or gutters. City of Moscow Engineering Department recommends that additional street right-of-way be dedicated along the south side of Hardin Road. This would help facilitate construction of a minor arterial in the future. So the additional 10 feet would allow it to be a 35-foot right-of-way on the south side. This is just a photo of that particular street, so it would need to be widened at some point in the future. As far as utilities go, the applicant provides limited electricity and lighting, but no, limited electricity for security lighting, but no electricity to individual storage spaces. Stormwater generated from the proposed development is conveyed along Farm Road, eventually captured by the City of Moscow stormwater system near A Street, near the intersection of A Street. The City of Moscow Engineering Department is recommending that the applicant detain the stormwater at a pre-development rate. City of Moscow detention standards require that the stormwater is detained and conveyed at that pre-development rate. So staff's recommendation tonight, based on the application and the fact that it is within the area of city impact, staff recommends that the Moscow Board of Adjustment put forth a recommendation of approval for the proposed conditional use permit for the RV storage facility located at 1348 Hardin Road to Latah County Commissioners with 4 recommended conditions. The applicant shall provide a grading plan prepared by a professionally licensed engineer and reviewed by the Latah County Planning and Building Department prior to any development occurring on the subject property. The applicant shall be required to detain the stormwater generated upon the subject property to city stormwater detention standards. The applicant shall install a type A landscape buffer on the south and east sides of the subject property. So those would be the adjacent properties that contain single-family homes, or there could be a single-family residence in that close proximity. And the applicant shall dedicate an additional 10 feet of street right-of-way along the southern side of Hardin Road adjacent to the subject property to help facilitate the construction of a minor arterial street standard in the future. So with that, and then the board directs staff to prepare relevant criteria and standards and to be approved and reviewed at an upcoming meeting. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
All right. I guess I'll start off the questions because my questions really relate to the conditions. The first one and the second one, those just seem typical for any kind of development. The second two, I'm curious why the landscape buffers, because it's not developed yet. And so that means it'd have to be sustained and use water for irrigation. But on the south side, the photograph that you showed looks like there's a hill between there and anybody to the south
With trees.
There is.
with trees. And then the east, that one was the one that had the greatest topography. And so I'm wondering, I guess, what good they would do,
What the reason would be, yeah.
other than they're just part of code.
Sure, sure. I think part of a good development means looking at adjacent properties and how they would be affected. As you see, there is a single family home right here. And so providing that buffer would allow a little bit of a buffer for the single family home. Additionally, there is a single family home up here. There is a single family home over here. Providing an additional buffer along this south side over here would buffer maybe some visual, some visual things that they may,
Only if the trees are 100 feet tall.
True. Arborvitae grows very quick. But that is the reason for that recommendation.
Okay.
Just kind of buffer from those adjacent properties.
And then my last question had to do with the fourth condition, and it almost seems like having the right of way for the future makes sense, but having the right of way on the same side that you want the landscape buffer almost seems like putting the cart before the horse. I mean,
So-
wouldn't you want to do the landscape buffer once the roadway is developed in the future?
So the roadway, the widening of the roadway is on the north side. On
Oh,
Hardin Road.
okay. I missed
And the adjacent, the landscape buffers would be on the east and the south. So the Hardin Road
Gotcha.
at the entrance is the 10-foot additional right-of-way we're recommending. Oh, I'm on a blank slide.
Joe, if you want, I'll ask my question off of that picture if you go back there.
Yep.
Is
Absolutely.
that
Sorry.
not the 10 feet you're asking for? Is that not already a Vista right away because of the power lines?
So
Since I have the same kind of thing in my property?
you're talking about along Hardin, the 10-foot right-of-way?
Yeah, so you're looking for it on that side of the road that
Correct,
we're showing it,
yes.
but that's like underneath the power line, so that's going to be a Vista right away anyway, right?
Yeah, eventually, once this does get annexed into the city, at that point, there would be probably additional right-of-way.
And-
And Avista probably likely has an easement there already.
And then my other question would be, since at this point it's slated as ag forest, when it becomes annexed, what's to keep them from asking for R4 and then having it by right?
That's always a possibility.
Okay.
I think that reading back through the comprehensive plan, future land use designation, I think it points more to R1, R2, R3. So that would probably be more so the direction that we would encourage them to go, given that it's the auto urban residential future land use map designation. But yes, absolutely. I mean, once it's annexed, if they wanted to switch over to a residential, I mean, it fits the comprehensive plan. But again, that's a proposal in the future, if they,
Right. Okay.
if they ever chose to do that.
So Amy, while you got that slide up there, I can see that the zoning allows for this through a conditional use permit. The comprehensive plan, the way I read it, doesn't seem to identify this as a use. I must be missing something, whereas you don't have a bullet there underneath that says that I mean, obviously, this has been approved previously, so the comprehensive plan existed then too. But I just, in reading this, I don't see how this development fits into the comprehensive plan.
Agreed. So the way it works within the area of city impact, that's what kind of makes this a little bit tricky. So within the area of city impact, the Latah County has adopted all of City of Moscow's zoning designations,
right.
with the exception of ag forest. So when it comes to the ag forest designation, we take Latah County's zoning and apply that. And per their zoning, this is a conditionally permitted use
Okay.
in the area of city impact.
For some reason, that wasn't real clear to me.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a little
Okay.
convoluted, but that's
Alright.
how that, yeah. So that's how that ties in. And so eventually, looking at future land use designation, when this is annexed, this is what the city has kind of designated that area for.
Okay,
And then I don't want to try to second guess the county, although we always do it anyway. Since this hasn't been in the recent history ag use, it's just been vacant ground. It's not like we're converting agricultural active land to something else. It's just
I
fallow
think,
land at this point.
I think at one point it probably was active
well, yeah.
farmland. I can't speak to when that was. From the,
Prior to 2020.
correct, yeah. So I think, yeah, at some point prior to that first conditional use permit application is when, I can't speak to an exact day
Right.
of when that happened, but it is currently not being farmed, no.
Okay.
I used to raise cattle there.
Okay.
So-
Question. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I had a question about, we're looking at the Latah County's comprehensive plan and that. Do they have requirements for fencing?
So in my reading through Latah County's requirements for this conditional use permit, there weren't a lot of performance standards or requirements that I could find. If there are any that Latah County wants to or needs to enforce at the time of permitting, they will, but I didn't see any from my reading through that. It just simply said it would be a conditional use permit. Our recommendations come based on the fact that those are some of the things we would like to see within the city, knowing that this property could at some point in the future be annexed. So those are concerns of ours, the stormwater, the right-of-way designation. Those are all things that we are concerned about. Within the city of Moscow, we also have additional, for certain zoning designations with storage facilities, we do have additional design standards, but that does not apply in this case.
Okay, yeah, I was curious because a lot of the storage facilities do have fences and but they're inside the city
For
limits.
sure.
Joe,
Okay.
I got a question.
Yes, sir. Go for it.
Amy, does the city of Moscow regulate stormwater regulations on university property?
No. The university diverts back to the state. So building review, engineering review, all of those things are done at a state level. So they don't necessarily, I think their standards are probably just as good as ours. I can't speak to exactly if they are, if they aren't, but it isn't something that we do plan review for the university at all.
Joe, I've got another one.
Yes.
On stormwater detention, does it make any difference whether it's an impervious or, so asphalt versus packed gravel?
Yeah, I do think it would. I can't speak to exactly what that requirement is. I have sent the stormwater standard over to the county, so they do have the city standard, so that if they do choose to adopt this recommended condition, they have the specifics of what that looks like for pervious versus impervious surfaces.
I have a question about, so this is a pretty significant increase in terms of spots for, from the 3 acre to this new lot, and it's gravel. And so I assume that there's going to be a fair bit of traffic with, 150-ish RVs coming and going as people use them and put them away. I'm wondering about the point at which like a dust abatement plan would be required and/or like an air quality permit would be needed from the state for dust management.
Yeah, that would be up to the county, again,
Okay.
since this falls under their permitting and their allowed uses. It would be up to them to at what point that would be required.
Be required, okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Of course.
With that, I'll open up the public hearing. If the applicant would care to come up and state your name and address to the record for us and tell us about this. And as part of your discussions, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on the 4 conditions, just so that we are all on the same page.
Yeah, Scott Becker with Hodge and Associates, 405 South Washington. Kirk is the applicant and, excuse me, and he couldn't make it today, so I'm here for him. Amy did a great job of laying out what the plan is. The 4 conditions, like you, Joe, I agree with the first 2.
Which you can accommodate for them.
And as far as stormwater, there are some stormwater controls in place, and we would increase those as it expands. With gravel, it's a little bit easier to deal with than if it was all impervious surface. So that one's a little bit easier to deal with. I talked to Kirk today and brought up some issues about weed control and about the noise control. And so he's entered into an agreement with someone to take care of all the weeds. And he's also agreed to work on, he's got a plan to cut down the noise on the alarm that when the gate opens and closes. So those are a couple things that he has agreed to work on. And that's going to be taken care of as soon as he gets back from Colorado. So.
Okay. I'm wondering, since you have clearly a civil background, are you aware of the Avista right of way? One of the questions that we had from the board. Do you know what's happening there? Is that an issue?
So that is an electrical easement that they have through that. So we could grant right of way to the city. There's no way to really widen that road or expand it without removing those high transmission lines. So those would be a challenge in the future. We could go somewhat, but we're going to have to make some adjustments with the big poles. And then the rest of the widening may have to take place on the other side of the road if it's annexed in. I don't really think that portion, any of those properties there would be annexed in unless we were able to bring sewer and water up through the university property, which is the most likely place to take it. That way we could gravity the sewer and then the water could go right through there. I know the university is a hard no now, but there's ways to do it without disrupting any of their services too. So in the future, that could be something that could be worked out. But for right now, this is something that doesn't use water, doesn't use sewer. It generates some income. It's, kind of a placeholder for the future. So if something in the future happened, it could be turned into residential pretty easily from what it is now.
Okay.
That's kind of the plan.
I have a question for you. If you're,
Yeah, absolutely.
you'd mentioned that it doesn't use water now.
Yeah.
If you put in a landscape buffer, it would need to have some use of water. How would that be accomplished?
Probably have to be a portable, hand watering of the plants. I don't see that putting any irrigation lines or that type of surface in would make any sense. It's too far away from the home site that would have water. And so I don't see that as being a good option. You can get water permits and, save the water for detention and draw it back out to water the plants in the future. But then that draws down and you're out for the, end of summer anyway. So I think it would all have to be hand watered if we did that.
Is there potential for your plan to, be modified to accommodate the native vegetation? Because there's already trees along that border, maybe not the whole length of it, but the chunk closest to the other properties.
Yeah, I do believe that Kirk is interested in planning a landscape buffer, but having it established is a challenge, right out of the gate. So there will be some tries and fails as far as the plantings go. I ran into that experience myself. I planted 300 trees and happened to be the summer that it got up to 100 degrees for 2 months. And, not much made it. So back to the drawing board. But yeah, he does have plans to do some additional planting around the perimeter.
Questions for the applicant? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm George Thurin.
State that into the mic just so they can pick it up in the back, your name and address.
Chairman, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Did you open the public hearing portion?
I did when the applicant came
Okay,
up,
okay,
but yeah.
just wanted to
and
make
we only
sure.
have a
Perfect.
couple, so yeah, I'm fine. If we had a full house, I'd have you hold off a second, but go ahead, George.
Okay, this is my wife Debbie. We live south. There's a small field between our place and the existing property, or the existing RV park, or whatever you want to call it. So we kind of have a say in what the heck's going on, I think. Maybe we don't. Amy, could you put that map back up that shows the expansion?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to point out, and I have a couple maps here that I'll give to you. In fact, you got one right here. There's a stream bed that runs right through here. It is, shoot. I could put the glasses.
Can you give him the marker?
Absolutely.
See if he can use it, so that we all get the same information.
Oh, right here. See, it's marked in red right there. And then you can also find it on,
What he is showing, and he's on our mic, so it's coming right through here, correct?
it's right here. So yes, yes. And it is on,
Does it end is that a detention pond? Is that what that's happening there?
yeah, there's a pond right there right now that has wildlife in it, believe it or not.
Is
Even
it-
though
is it-
last year he bulldozed the whole thing.
Is it a natural pond or is it detention
Wrong
for the
button.
earlier expansion?
Well,
development?
prior to last year, it was an actual pond with a full everything.
Okay,
He took a bulldozer in there last year and he redid the whole thing with his bulldozer. So now it's not the natural pond anymore, but it's still a pond right there.
If
And
I,
it is right exactly where he wants to expand this thing on the west end.
if I could have you step back there, not that I don't want you in my space, but it picks, your voice gets picked up there by the mic.
I could,
Did you need these back or can we continue looking
you
at them
can
here?
have 'em.
Okay.
so, that's one point. I think that this impervious surface thing that this man brought up is probably a big deal here. We don't want the drippings and the contamination from 150 vehicles running into the stream, which runs into Paradise Creek, which runs into the South Fork of the Palouse. I mean, this is where it starts. This is where we draw the line and say, we don't want this stuff polluting our environment. Besides the fact that we have wells there, we have a well, and we don't want the stuff running down into our well and drinking antifreeze or motor oil or whatever gets dropped. So we're thinking that the impervious surfaces should be recommended so that this containment system that you guys want to come up with, or somebody wants to come up with, can actually function rather than the stuff running into the ground before it gets to the containment system. I also think that he should have a plan in place of what he's going to do with his stream bed. He's got it's seasonal and it runs from above his house or above this property. So the snow melt and rain and so forth is going to have to come through here somewhere or somehow through a pipe. I don't know what he's got in mind for this. I don't think he outlines it in his application. Maybe he should. Another thing is I think that homeowners associations around the city don't allow motorhomes to be parked in front of their homes. They don't allow construction equipment. They don't allow old beat up cars, this kind of stuff. Because they don't want to look at them. They don't want to see them. They don't want to deal with them. So these storage facilities that you see around are a result of those homeowners associations not allowing it at their place or at a person's home. So what we're left with here, our little small community right here, is they're all being dumped off there so that we have to deal with them. So we have to look at them every day, as opposed to the people that actually own the things. And I think that that's a big deal also. I don't think that we should be subjected to any more of this stuff. Kirk has not taken care of what he's got there. It's completely overgrown. There's no safety fence. There's no, I don't know, security fence of any kind, or, anybody could walk in there and rip those things off. We're subject to that too, because we're living so close to it. We're old, for goodness sakes. We don't want people, doing that kind of thing in that area. I don't know what else to say to you guys. I think that Amy did a great job with her presentation and her 4 things that she wants you to do, but I think you should take it a step further. I think you should require a fence at least along Hardin Road and Farm Road to block off looking at all the junk every time we go in and out of our house. And I think that you should require some kind of a drain pipe or something to run underneath that part if you do approve this, to catch the runoff. Where's it going to go? I think that it should be an impervious surface so that you can actually catch the stuff that's dripping out of these things, as opposed to letting it run in the ground through the gravel that's there now. So that's all I have to say. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Your turn. Please state your name and address in the mic.
My name is Josh Clark, and 1 second. I'm supposed to speak with gum in your mouth. My name is Josh Clark. This is my wife, Shelley Clark. We live at 1251 Mix Road. We are the 3.5 acre parcel that is surrounded by the 16.5 acres where this is proposed. So we are the little house on the hill that would be completely engulfed by this RV park. So I'm here for obvious reasons that maybe don't impact this decision, but for the sanctity of our property and our property value, we would like to speak against it. I would say Kirk's a great guy. We like Kirk. He sold us our house. His father, Dick, built that house. My wife's from Genesee. Her family's been farming their entire lives out there. And we moved to that area because we did want to be in the country and we did want to be in the fields. And we've been there for 10 years. And for half of it, it was farmed. It was wheat 1 year, barley the next, wheat and barley. And it was awesome. Kirk took it out of farming a handful of years ago and started this RV project. We're still in communication with him. My wife was even chatting with him today. So this is nothing against Kirk, but we're just speaking for our own property. The one thing, you guys have a letter from us in your packets there and pictures. One thing that was really hard on us for the first one was the construction. It was bulldozing every single day for months at a time. It was all the, I don't know if it was Poe or Motley, but the dump trucks of gravel just flying down that road, spitting gravel everywhere for months at a time, like 30 or 40 a day. And we've got 2 kids here that are already pulling out on that road that has no lane markers, no turn markers. People already speed on that road. It's a country road and we're on a blind corner. And there's no other access right into that facility. So that was very challenging on us, and just the constant construction and the constant stuff. I mean, it was tough. So expanding it even to twice the size is going to be very long, very drawn out, and be very challenging on our road. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mix Road, but if you go out on Almond, past Rosars, past the radio station, that's Mix Road. And then if you take Almond and Mix and you go all the way out, it basically makes a horseshoe to 95. We're very confident, and maybe you are too, that at some point it is going to be annexed into the city. It's already happening. Houses are being built out there, land's being sold. A lot of that farm ground is for sale. And it just kind of makes sense that that's going to be the next natural extension of Moscow city limits. Our neighbor, Rachel, who is almost 100 years old, or maybe 100 if I'm misspeaking, she's got a beautiful property. And so she's the first one on the edge of town, and we're the first one in the county. She obviously can't be here to represent hers. And I don't know if her family has even been notified, but this is happening. But she's got a beautiful house, a beautiful property, an arboretum, a pond, a barn. And that's also sits right in the draw between her house and our house and their property that would also be affected by this. And she's not here to speak for that. So that's another concern. Also, we've got a lot of wildlife that we really enjoy and thoroughly love. We've got moose, we've got deer, we've got fox, we've got coyotes, we've got lots of birds, and migration birds were in a path. And so that part would be really sad to see go as well. And I don't have a lot to say that's not just for protecting our own personal property, but it is a dangerous road. And if you add what we already have onto that road, as far as the traffic, and it is dawn until dusk, we hear that gate opening, and it is our backyard. And you can see the pictures, but when my wife is out there in her garden on our property, the RV lot is right there. And there are people in that RV lot from first thing in the morning until the evening. And, you know, the complaint is not even the gates beeping and opening and closing all day and night. It's the people that are in the lot. And we've already had instances of people living in their trailers in the lot, which we've notified. We go to Kirk before anyone else. We've never involved the sheriffs or the police. He's our neighbor, so we talk through him. We have a great relationship. And he is taking care of that. But there's people in there also with their junkers, working on cars. And we've seen people in there just sitting on camp chairs in front of their stuff, you know, hanging out. And it's not a comfortable situation, especially for me when my wife's out there in the garden. There's just a lot of people around, and not what I believe for the intended purpose. Yes, there's plenty of people doing exactly what they should do, bringing their RVs and trailers and cars in and leaving. There's also plenty of people spending a lot of time in the lot that we perceive that's maybe outside of the boundaries of just picking up or dropping off a trailer. So between that and the wildlife and the property that we live on and the construction that's to come and the safety of that road and what we've already dealt with the first implementation of this project, we're a little fearful. And if you guys, I would encourage you before making your recommendation to take a drive down that road and go around the corners and see that there's no lanes and there's no turns, and the impact that hundreds of dump trucks and gravel trucks and graders and bulldozers have going through our little place on a daily basis has to all of our local people and our surrounding neighbors. And now we've had about 5 or 6 new homes built out on that road. There's a lot more traffic, even just from the community growing itself. So we're just here to plead that we would love to not be surrounded by an RV park. I also think as Moscow annexes that into the city, whether it's now or in 10 years, I don't think a big horseshoe RV park is the first thing we want people seeing in that beautiful countryside. I mean, that's part of what it's all about, the rolling hills of Palouse, and we have it all out on Mix Road. It is a gorgeous area of town. And we would like, even with the houses being built out there, they could be very beautiful neighborhoods without a massive RV park just kind of impending on it. So I think that's about it. Do you have anything else, honey? No? Yes? Okay. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
I have a question for you,
Yeah,
if you mind. I'm assuming based on what we have, your house is what we see in the top right-hand corner there.
Yes.
And is the elderly lady you're talking about to the south of you?
Yep, right there.
And the topography lines stop, but that looks like another natural pond
It is.
in that area. I guess from a grade standpoint, does all that drain down to the southwest?
Yeah, and it's a little tricky. So between our house and her house, it kind of concaves a little bit right into the middle. And then it actually drains down towards their property. So it goes to the original pond, basically, that Kirk bulldozed. And then it would hit hers a little bit, but it kind of, we're on the top of a hill, and then everything goes down towards her place and then down back towards Hardin Road.
Okay.
Or basically right towards the RV park.
So then, if I'm understanding the topography that you're describing, the type A buffer that's shown on the south side, or I mean, not type A, whatever the buffer is, every type, that's kind of like between the two? Is that what's happening? It's kind of drawing across to the west?
Yeah, maybe you come up, Shelley.
Not quite sure what you're asking. Like, all the marking on the bottom there, is that really the buffer? All those?
Yeah, that hatch that goes kind of just east-west.
Yeah, I would get pretty much everything from our place and from her place.
Okay. The second question that I have for you has to do with the landscape buffer that we were questioning, because a landscape buffer only grows so high, and if you're on a hill, it doesn't help you. But the pictures that were provided seem relatively level, so it's hard to tell how useful that would be to the surrounding properties to the east and to the south.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know what your all responsibility, this is my first time doing a meeting like this, what your responsibility is outside of this meeting room, but it's also why I encourage you to take a drive out there before making a recommendation and look at the draw between our house and Rachel's house, go down Mix, take a left on Hardin, drive past the RV park, keep going and kind of see where their property is. And you can really see the topography and what's being requested. Because I do believe what you're saying, the pictures don't quite do it justice.
Any other questions for the?
Well, I don't know if you're the one to answer, but we don't have a scale here, and I'm getting distorted pictures of, it looks to me like there's quite a bit of distance between these facilities we're talking about, the homes, but maybe not. Like between the elderly lady's house in the bottom right corner and your house, would you estimate what that distance is?
I would say from our driveway to hers, if we're looking straight across our property, like 200 yards. Maybe. And I can show, I don't know what you guys want to see. I can show you a picture I just took of the sunset tonight that shows a beautiful sunset and the RV park right in the backyard. And that's, from our backyard where Shelley has her garden, down to the RV park. So basically we're on the top of the hill, and then to go straight down, you're probably 50 yards.
So from this property line on the rear right here until this first row of RVs, this is 300 feet.
Okay.
What is that in there, Amy? What is that? Those aren't spaces, right? What is
These lines,
yeah.
those are topographical grade changes. I think they're 5 foot increments.
So there's
Scott, you would know. Is it 2 or
spaces in
5?
there for RVs.
2. They're 2 feet. No, where the steepest slope is, there's no proposal of RVs there. These lines are 2 feet grade changes all the way down.
And
So starting at the top.
right there, that's the Clark's residence?
This is the Clark's residence.
So I thought I heard you say a couple of times that you were surrounded by the RV park.
Yes.
My misunderstanding?
Yeah. So, and that's why I'm saying this doesn't do it justice, and why I would encourage you to drive by. So I don't have a laser pointer, but if I can show you. It doesn't do it. Yeah, it doesn't do it justice, but basically, okay, so I don't know why this looks so dramatic, as like it looks like there's acres here. This is probably 50 yards from where our garden is at the back part of our property to the start of the RV park. You can see the topographical changes here. He's also proposed digging out this entire hill, which would be putting in a tremendous retaining wall so that he could build these spaces, which are in that grade. Then he's already built and gravelled a lot all the way up this side, which we don't believe was actually even approved yet. So the work on this extension has already been done and completed before this hearing. And I think it's been paused because this hasn't been approved yet. So the lot actually already comes up here. So if you're on the back side of our house, this is already done. And so the only part of our house that wouldn't be surrounded from the back to the side is this awesome draw that goes from Mix Road to where the gravel is already right now, right here, and Rachel's house. So the proposal of it to come all the way up is what we were struggling with.
Amy, do we have the distance between that Josh is referring to there?
Between their property line and the neighboring home
And the proposed
and the proposed RV spaces, 300 feet from the rear property line. That corner on the far southwestern corner, it looks like it comes right up to their property, this right there, yep.
Gotcha.
But all the way to the west, that's the 300 feet to the west. So it looks like parallel to where their southern property line is.
Yeah.
But
But this has already been developed. What's being proposed is already gravelled and lined and developed.
And all the facilities on the north side, that is the Hardin residence?
Yeah,
Correct.
so Kirk's property is here. He's got a shed that he rents out, a mobile home that he rents out here, and
Okay.
this is his whole property. And then our neighbors, George that spoke earlier, are right here.
I thought
they're
that was-
actually further to the
I thought that
south.
was the- I thought that was the Avista.
Sorry, that's
Avista.
No,
Adam's
this is
storage.
right
Yeah, so you guys are more.
Two roads come together.
They're
Yeah.
further up.
So
Did I
is
get
the
that?
radio tower that one little white square in the middle of
Yes.
the big square?
Yes,
Just south of where you're pointing?
Right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the radio tower, okay.
Yep, and then the Avista is here.
Oh.
So I have a question more in the southwest corner where the pond is. And I understand he's filled in the pond or to change the configuration of the pond.
Yep.
And so he's planning to use that area also for development.
Yeah.
And, but that's where the creek comes through.
Yes.
So,
See the pond
right.
right there and the proposed site, parking spaces
Right.
right over the top of it right there. And also over the top of the creek. And that same creek goes underneath our driveway,
So that's their driveway right there.
you know, and then it goes into the sheep farm and eventually into Paradise Creek.
So I was just wondering, have you seen any ability or change to where he's going to be able to cover all that up and redirect the water or deal with the water?
We haven't discussed that with him, and to be honest, I'll let George speak for them because they drive past that every day. We don't. We come right off of Mix Road and go into our driveway. We don't spend time back here, but they do every day because they live here. So I don't know if you would like to speak to that.
Well, I know you mentioned that they bulldozed it, but
Right,
yeah,
we did,
I-
completely, and now it's kind of grown back a little bit, and there's still a pond there. I mean, it's kind of dried up now because he put a drain in it so that it would drain out. But the point is that there's water that's gonna flow through there every year, when the snow melts, in the spring, when it's raining hard, whatever. there's nowhere for that water to go. if you-
Chairman, can you have him talk into the microphone?
Yeah, I was going to say, if we have no more questions for Josh, then let's let George, so what he's saying comes into the mic, and I'll just kind of pick up what you're saying, because the mic may not have said that, but George had already mentioned that we're seeing proposed parking stalls over a current naturally occurring pond drainage that has been covered,
Joe,
and you live south of that. So can you clarify that?
I can
Yeah.
clarify. I grew up out there.
Okay.
I grew up in the little white house right across from your driveway.
Really?
There was never a natural occurring pond there. There was always just a ditch in the road. That pond was created by Mr. Harden. It was never natural.
Okay, when did that happen, sir?
About 1978.
Okay, so it's been there for 30 years or more.
Yeah.
That pond has been there.
See, I used to raise cattle right there where the pond is,
Okay,
and there was never a natural pond there. It
okay,
was just a drainage ditch.
okay. It's
next
a
to the road.
man-made thing from 1978.
Yeah.
Okay. But there is a ditch that runs through there, or on all the maps, they call it a stream bed. Okay. That means something, doesn't it? I mean, you got to do something with that so that it doesn't get polluted with all the runoff from 150 motorhomes.
What I would suggest, Joe, that we continue with the public hearing and then let the applicant,
You were reading my mind. I was just letting
yeah, it
George
isn't up to
talk.
me. It's
Yeah, I was.
let the
Okay, you're
applicant-
done now. I'm done then.
No, if you have more to say, I'm not going to cut you off, but,
If that's the right word.
yeah, I was going to ask the civil engineer to come back up at the end
I
like
would
we always
love to
do.
hear his plan for what he's got
Okay.
in mind there, so that we're all protected.
Perfect.
I mean, the whole environment is protected,
Okay.
so.
Joe, can I ask a question before Scott responds?
To George or to?
To Amy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Has the city staff accounted for water considerations and runoff considerations?
Yes, so the pond or stream that is being referred to as it's not a U.S. waterway identified by the Army Corps of Engineers. We have made the recommendation that stormwater runoff be detained at the pre-development rate, and that report generated by a civil engineer to account for those water issues. You do have the option to add a recommended condition to do a wetland delineation study if that's something you're considering and you're concerned about. If you are concerned that it could be a wetland and maybe that study needs to happen. So we've kind of taken that into an account. And so if you'd like to make that a recommendation, we can add that to the final recommended condition to the county.
Thank you. Number two, who is ultimately responsible for discharge from these vehicles and who would oversee that?
So discharge from the actual RVs there.
Yeah.
So that would be Mr. Harden's, whatever rules, regulations he has on his property. The county then would oversee any environmental quality issues that are existing. Because it's the area of city impact that would fall on the county.
So that's not a consideration for us.
To a degree. I mean, I think that's why we made the recommendation that all stormwater and all the runoff, because eventually if it's stormwater, it's going to take any discharge from any vehicle and run it into whatever storm water catchment, right? Mechanism. And so we made that recommendation that it's detained at a pre-development rate, prepared by a civil engineer so that it's done properly.
Thank you.
Which was one of the considerations.
Correct.
But you're
We're talking-
talking, I think, two different things. One is detention at the previous established rate. The other is cleanliness and taking care of all of the contaminants. And that
sure.
seems to me to be a different issue.
When it goes into our stormwater system, it goes back into the treatment facility and clean. And so I don't believe that our stormwater standards allow it to be discharged into a stream. It has to be detained and treated.
On site?
I don't know that it's on site. I think it's usually a catch basin, correct, on site, and then flows into the system-ish.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we could
I'm not
get
the
the civil
engineer
engineer
here.
come up and.
Yeah.
I'm hoping you can address this, and I understand a little bit about stormwater detention versus oil water separations for vehicles that are dropping fluids that necessarily an RV parked there wouldn't if there are other vehicles there using spaces that are an uncovered machine shop kind of thing.
Correct, yeah. And Scott Becker with Hodge and Associates, 405 South Washington, again, just to make sure on the record. Yeah, so the stormwater, there's a handful of issues there. Where the drainage runs now, that may be, will be changed slightly, and probably not all those spaces will be used. We wanted to make sure that for the conditional use permit, we included all of that so that during the stormwater report, we could make those changes and fit a pond and some detention and treatment as necessary in that area. So treatments a lot of times will include running through a swale, a grassy swale. Well, prevention is obviously the first one to let any treatment out. So Kirk does have items in his lease that require for the requirements. And then we would detain the water to slow it down. A part of the detention would probably be through a swale to slow it down. So it's being treated while it's being detained, and then a larger detention facility before it's discharged into the rest of the stream that flows down through the farm. So we would be treating and detaining the water at the same time. But yeah, the pond will most likely not be in that configuration when it's done. It's not probably the most efficient use of that land for a detention pond.
Do you have an idea where you would put the detention pond?
Probably in that lower corner, that southwest corner is the
Where
lowest
the
spot.
old pond was?
That's the discharge area, and probably right in that triangle would be the smartest place. There's some field accesses there off of Farm Road, and we wouldn't block field access, but work around those.
And then just for my clarification, the water would leave that pond or the future pond, and then it would head down Farm Road, go through the Peterson addition, and then connect with wastewater going.
And it actually never connects. It just the treatment is the swale, is the grassy areas, is the ditch.
Where does the water go next
So
after it
it'll
goes
get
down Farm
collected
Road?
down there at A and Farm, and then run.
And then run across to Paradise Creek
Yes, exactly.
on its way out of town.
Yep.
Okay.
Joe, I have another question for staff, if I may.
Go ahead.
Amy, who's responsible for unauthorized development of that property?
Unauthorized development in what way?
Well, the
grading?
testimony included indication that there is already land being developed for lots down here to the southeast.
So typically, at least within city limits, grading only requires a permit if it reaches a certain threshold. I can't speak to what that is. So oftentimes people are able to go out and grade their property. I don't know at what point grading and graveling is a violation of unapproved development. When you can typically do that on your property, you can grade and gravel without a permit within the city.
Who would make that determination if it was a breach of some ordinance
Probably the zoning administrator.
for the county or for the city?
I'm trying to recall previous situations, and I believe that in the past it has been the city.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is that number 5,000 square feet?
Yes.
Do you know?
For detention, for grading and graveling in the county, I don't know as though
Okay.
there is a lot of control over that. If he were to park RVs there and charge for it, then yeah, he would absolutely be in violation right now without the approval of the CUP.
If we have no further questions, we can let him sit down
Okay.
and I will close the public hearing.
What about we have somebody else that came in, they didn't want to
Oh.
test?
Would you, before I formally close the hearing, would you care to speak for, neutral, or against this? Sure. Okay.
Can I
Wh-
say one more thing?
You may come back up, state your name and address again for us.
George Duran, 1210 Hardin Road. It was nice of the engineer to come up here and speak to this thing. He says that he's not sure, but they probably wouldn't use a lot of those spots along where the creek bed is. He isn't sure what the configuration of that would be. So why not take those off of there, off the application now, so that they don't have the potential of doing this because it's already permitted? Does that make sense? I mean, those spots could be used if you give them a permit to do it. So why not pull those spots off until after they figure out what they want to do with it, and then approve those spots that are along that creek bed? It seems like a reasonable thing to me, that you wouldn't approve it so that they could either use it or not use it when it's a critical part of this whole thing. That's all I got to say.
Okay. I think as a group, we'll probably discuss that.
The applicant address.
Well, I think I can address that because the whole point is it's already been approved once. And so this is a potential maximum amount that they're getting a conditional use for to approve and promote and utilize as it grows, just like any other development. Even the conditions that the city's imposed are based on future growth. So to me, showing all of those developed is the potential future development of it. And if you do a third of them now, in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, you come back and you do another one. So there's argument either way. I can see that, and it is what it is. But technically, we're closing the public hearing, and the board needs to deliberate this. I'll start. I've been looking at the 7 criteria, and it seems like the numbers 3 and 4 are the ones that I would say we need to discuss. 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 seem like, they're normal, but maybe that's a place to start. I still, after hearing testimony, I can understand putting the buffer in. I'm concerned about running it between the 2 residences. The natural draw that's already there, to me, seems to be appropriate. But there's an image in our packet. I don't recall if it was up there, Amy, but it addresses that horseshoe configuration mentioned that Tim questioned, and it's on page 2 of 7 for us. Is that on? It's a big highlighted blue section that shows, I think, the extent of this property, but it's just not all being developed.
Yes, that's correct.
So, and Tim, I'm referring to this image.
2 of 7.
So when they say they're being
Up front.
horseshoed, I kind of see what Josh was talking about, although they're not putting stuff clear up the hill. I think it's just the property line. Yeah, see how that kind of comes out and around. Yeah. Thoughts?
I've got a couple things. Joe, Amy, did you mention that there's a separate storage facility across Farm Road to the west?
I believe right here,
Yeah.
I think this is self-storage.
You mentioned that also in your,
I don't know that I did on my staff report,
okay.
but that is a self-storage
That was one of
facility.
the things I wanted to
Yes.
point out, that there is a large storage facility there existing too, and they actually came in, got a conditional use permit, and then they got another conditional use permit to expand that facility.
That's a different situation.
I know, I'm just pointing,
Actually, you're not on the mic, so I can't have anybody else talking at this point.
I'm just pointing out some of the things that are out there in the neighborhood. So. Well, I think with the recommendations for conditions will help alleviate the situation. And I know the Clarks are good friends with Mr. Harden, and I'm just curious as whether or not the buffer strip that is recommended could even be extended. It can't be forced upon them, but if trying to appease the neighbor, if the buffer strip could even be extended for some, large, fast-growing trees or something like that, if that would help with the situation there.
We're not in a position where we can modify the application at all, is it?
No.
Well, see, to me, that's the biggest problem with doing ACI hearings, or, all we're doing is recommending to the county, and the county can say, yeah, we agree with you, or no, we don't.
No, we missed it.
So all these nice folks are going to have to go through this whole thing again with the actual decision-making body. All we're really going to do is tell the county, this is what we would like to see if you're going to let it happen. And the county has the ability to say, yeah, that's nice, but no. So that's always the other half of this particular situation that we're in right now.
They can hold their own hearings also, Amy, right, if they don't agree with us?
Correct.
Correct.
I have another question for staff. Amy, can you talk about number 3 in terms of the relevant criteria and standards, number 3, number 4, and number 5, and what the city's consideration of those have been to allow us to get to the point where the city is, or the staff is recommending approval subject to these other conditions listed on page 7?
Sure. So I think number 3 discusses the generating nuisances. That is why we recommended the landscape buffer, to kind of shield those properties adjacent to from maybe some of the eyesore or noises that are coming off of the property. So that was taken into consideration there. The location, design, and size of the proposed use would be adequately served by existing streets. There's already an existing facility there. We did request that an additional 10 feet right of way is dedicated at some point for that road to be expanded at some point. And what was the other one? Was it 3, 4, and
5.
and 5? Yeah, and the proposed use won't endanger the public health or safety where it's proposed. It's in existence now. There hasn't been much danger to the public. It sounds like there have been some nuisances, and we'd like to address that with that landscape buffer. You are able to impose or recommend additional conditions if you find that, say, maybe a security fence might help the situation, if you feel that there is actually danger to people wandering to adjacent properties. So those things, you can add additional recommended conditions if you feel that there is some sort of health, safety concern there as well.
Does the permitting for an RV park have specific, at the county level, does it have specific requirements in terms of use?
Not that I'm aware of. It is just a conditional use in that zoning designation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to just make a few comments here. I'm going through Mr. Duran's letter here and ticking down all of the items that he's concerned about, plus his testimony. And some of the things I think we've learned here is impact on surrounding residential property values. I get that. I think that's a legitimate concern we would all have. I think it's being addressed to some extent with the requirements of the buffer. Environmental concerns, runoff and contamination. I think we've learned that the detention pond will be designed and built to address both detention and contamination as part of the design of the site. Noise pollution. As far as the gate alarm, I think we learned from the engineer that the applicant is willing to soften the alarm, maybe even turn it off. I don't know, but certainly I can see why beeping all the time, and it can be a nuisance. And I think he's accepted some mitigation in that area. Sounds like he's also willing to have a firm come in and take care of weed growth and control. I can visualize how that can look pretty bad. And so that's kind of being addressed. The fencing and security requirements, I think, is legitimate. It seems to me that the people who live around there the people who have stuff inside ought to feel are secure, and those who live outside of the perimeter ought to feel that there's some kind of a fence that prevents people from just wandering through the fields out there. Seems like that could be a reasonable addition, maybe as a condition. And then when I look at the Clark letter here, I understand construction traffic, that it might sound insensitive because I don't live there, but it is a temporary thing that will be probably bad while that occurs, but that does come with construction. And then he also mentions the beeping of the gate that I think I'm talking about. So in other words, I guess I'm saying is quite a bit of this has been addressed, mitigated, probably not to the satisfaction of people who live around there. And I think the dilemma we have is seems like a pretty remote area, except for the people who live, the two families, maybe the third one, if the lady was able to come. Is that a good enough reason, though, to keep from a legitimate need throughout the community? Those are things I'm thinking about.
Other thoughts? Something I think maybe to kind of piggyback on what Tim was saying, the lease agreement, and it was mentioned, I think, but I don't know because it's not in here. There isn't anything that, I don't know what a person can rent their space and put there. And so there was testimony that there might actually be vehicles that people work on there. And so I guess I would like to see a recommendation when it goes back to the county that be part of the proposal, so that if tenant Z, their space is an old car that they're working on, I would think that those types of spaces, if they're allowed, maybe they're not even allowed and they're going to get kicked out, but if they're allowed, then those types of spaces would clearly need a non-pervious, something that it can catch and drain stuff, not just run off through the ground. So not just a non-pervious compacted gravel kind of condition. But that's if those are even allowed. I don't even know if that's, if this is a.
Yeah, it may have something to do with the contract between Mr. Hart and the tenant.
Exactly, and that's unknown here, and it's something that might be, usable to the county if half a dozen of these are for that type of rent of space or not.
Well, I think I would state it if we were going to do it as a condition that this is for storage of
Storage, not working on.
storage and not a workspace, a working space.
Well, that's exactly what he's calling it too, is a RV storage facility, not a repair shop. Yeah, I would imagine that's in the condition of the lease. I mean, it ought to be. You can only store your
And it
vehicle here.
might be.
You can only
But it-
stay on the site for so many hours or so. So those are reasonable limitations to put into the lease when the tenant is going to sign to use the facility. I don't know what the leases look like, but
Yeah.
those would be reasonable conditions in a lease. From my
We don't-
experience.
We don't know what's in the lease.
We don't. I'm just saying, but that can be
Well, we
addressed
can-
through that process.
Through putting a condition.
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I was leaning to, is that we suggest maybe that be a condition that when it goes back to the county, that the lease agreement be part of that, so that they're aware of what a person is allowed to park here or what a person is not allowed to park there. Because then it would drive what the two items 1 and 2 that are already being used, the part of that civil report.
I think
It's
Amy
like-
has a comment.
I would just want to add that I think it would be very tricky to define what working on a vehicle is. Say you have somebody who's stored their RV there through the winter, they've got a dead battery. and now they're replacing their battery. Is that considered work, or is that considered maintenance on a vehicle? And so I think you have to be kind of careful about conditioning it in that way. Again, the county will be the ultimate decider, and they can curtail however, if they want to adopt that or not. But I think something maybe to the effect of clearly defining rules and regulations within a lease around maintenance of vehicles would be appropriate. But I think be careful about how we define maintenance on a vehicle.
Yeah. I
Given.
think, say, general maintenance and not
Repair.
major repair.
Yeah, that can be done in a lease. I mean, I've
For sure.
had experience in that.
I don't.
And it even
Should be
seems
our
like it could be
responsibility.
No,
allowable.
I agree. We shouldn't be dictating what lease can, I'm
Right.
just saying that is the mechanism to use to
Correct.
address that concern.
Correct.
Well, it seems like it could be one of those, a recommendation that if Mr. Harden wants to have a lease that allows that type of use, that our recommendation is to pave the site. So, given that the conditions are, it's a gravel semi-permeable lot, it should be restricted to, being used by rent or, lease or lessees that aren't going to be, draining oil and, like if they have to, change a battery or something, fine, but there shouldn't be any draining of fluids on the site, the vehicle needs to be towed off site for that, unless he wants to pave the parking lot.
I want to go down a different rabbit hole for a minute.
Fair enough.
According to the drawing, it's 118 spaces. Am I correct, Scott? About that? Amy, for you,
Yes.
118 space parking lot.
Mhm.
How big a building is that? Is that a Walmart? Is that
It would depend on the use of the building.
I'm assuming
yeah.
it's retail.
Assuming it's retail. Retail requires one space per 400 square feet. So, you multiply that by 4. It's a pretty large building.
And on that kind of parking lot, we have parking lot standards
Correct.
that say you have to have a certain amount of shade, you have to have a certain amount of swales between. And this harkens back to the Wild West days where we had just flat top that goes everywhere with no anything in it for beautification, safety, or otherwise. You guys didn't want to address that, or?
Because this is zoned ag forest, we're working with the Latah County zoning code, not ours.
Okay.
Because it's not our zoning code and because this is a gravelled surface, and it's, temporary in nature to a degree, there's no requirement for the paving. If it were within the city limits and this were proposed in, say, a motor business, then we'd look at paving and the requirements thereof.
It also seems just from the engineer's comments that Mr. Harden is looking at this as my guess is that he is not interested in paving this site because he's looking at this as a way to use the site without a long-term impact, and that gives him the flexibility to potentially sell if there's, a desire to develop or do something else. So I think he sees this gravel lot as a way to use the site without making a significant permanent change to this property.
And it really isn't ever going to develop out until water and sewer can get there,
Yeah.
which is going to be predicated on the university changing their approvals or disapproval.
We seem to be making quite a bit of assumptions trying to look into the future, and the comment was about the traffic on this rather small road. But yet the expectation that the city's going to annex and it's going to probably develop further to the north. What triggers the city to say, okay, this road no longer can handle this traffic. Now it's got to be widened, better base, more durable, safer. What clicks? Does anybody here
Well,
have?
it's not with the city, it's
Or-
with the highway district.
Okay, all right.
And then the highway district will turn it over to the city and it becomes the city's problem to take an unimproved road when the annexation happens.
So in other words, there is then a normal process that you reach a point where after a traffic count, they say this road no longer can handle the congestion or the density, and now it's got to be improved. I just want to, instead of wondering, is there a mechanism that just naturally follows when development keeps growing and now the road that serves that area is no longer compatible?
Well, it's usually in conjunction with the developer. Developer.
Correct. And in this case, it would need to be annexed within the city for us to be able to weigh in.
Yeah.
But it would be at the point when development is proposed on this lot, say, at some point, there's an annexation and a rezone application for a subdivision. At that point, that's when roads are assessed to see if they meet the need of what's being proposed.
And at this point, I'm assuming that the purple adjoining at Mix Road or Almond is where the annexation currently is.
Purple? Oh, purple.
The purple that's running up the
Yes.
east side of
R1.
Almond.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll take a crack at a motion, Joe.
Before you do, I have one more question for staff. Can you go back a slide that shows the overlay on Hardin Road on the west side? And I'm just concerned, I don't know if setbacks come into play, but we're showing potential leasable spaces seem to go clear up to the property line. And so I'm wondering how tight can this type of development, obviously you can't build a building that close, but
With there being no buildings, there would really not be a setback.
okay. Okay, that answers my question. Marshall?
Okay, well, I'm
Sorry, I'm unfamiliar with the process and I'm not supposed to talk. Is it possible to just make one more comment from public record, or is that completely over? It was in regard to the road.
I'm going to allow it just because we have such a small group. So do I have to formally open up the public hearing to do that?
I'm sorry for the disruption.
This is how this will work, I think. I'll open this up. I'll let you come up, state your name and address and your question. And then,
You got to let Scott come back up.
Or the other party. If they want to.
I don't think either one would probably want to come up to what I'm going to say. It's just one quick comment on traffic.
is a comment or a question?
It's a recommendation. It's a recommendation for what you guys recommend.
I'm going to back that up. Then I thought you had a question that I was hoping that we could have answered. If it's a comment, then we're closed for
I
the.
wanted to add something to your guys' recommendation regarding the traffic on Mix Road, but
I think it's something that's going to have to wait until this gets to the county if it's something that we don't adequately address for you. Okay, sorry.
thank you for the.
Good answer, Joe.
I mean, I answered died.
I know, it's nice, I appreciate it.
Okay, so you're gonna take a shot at this?
I'll
I
take a
think?
shot at
Okay.
it and then we can all weigh in on it. I would recommend that the Board of Adjustment recommends approval to the Latah County Board of Commissioners with the conditions that staff has requested that we consider, and with the additional condition that no major repairs on vehicles are done at the site. I know that's kind of an ambiguous statement, but it opens the eyes. And that we also ask staff to prepare relevant criteria and standards for us to preview.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear
Before,
a second?
Chair, before, can we, I don't want to change your motion, but maybe add something to the motion specifically talking about runoff or what major repairs would be. That way there's a little bit more clarity. Maybe add something to the condition about what major repairs are, whether that entails changing of motor fluids or anything that might, right? That way there's a little bit more clarity for the county to look at, to see what what the concern was there.
As an example, not just
Yeah.
a limited
Yeah,
list.
I would add to my condition that no major repairs of vehicles done on site. As an example, replacing motor, replacing transmission,
things that would require an oil water separator.
Correct.
Thank you.
Now we have a motion.
I have a
Yeah.
quick question, just because it's not really on here, but it says, so the condition number 3, the install a type A landscape buffer. I mean, obviously we see it in the hatch pattern along the south, but it says here the south and east. So where is it going on the east side?
So there's a lot of existing vegetation already along this side. The
Okay.
applicant can maintain that and use that as his type A buffer, but where it is sparse and there needs to be additional vegetation added, that's what we would have them do. That's what a type A would typically require.
Okay.
But I think Ivy's question, and I mirror it, we see the buffer air zone along the south. Where along that hill would you consider the buffer on the east side? Because that
So that
kind
would
of has
be
that horseshoe kind of effect around their property,
along this edge here,
up and down that hill.
Okay.
adjacent to the property line.
That makes sense. I almost don't think it's super necessary to have the buffer in that little piece where they're not developing it.
Sure.
But definitely seems like if they just went up the hill and maybe even cut out that last row of spots, that would be very helpful.
Do I have a second on this motion?
No second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. I'll start at Jerry's end.
Let's do further discussion.
Do you want to do further
Yeah,
discussion?
these guys might want to weigh into that.
Well, maybe I should have mentioned it earlier. Do we feel any obligation to require a security fence?
That's not my motion.
I know it's not.
I know it's not.
I'm a little late.
That's not in your motion. Ivy's comment on modifying any landscape buffer is not part of it.
I just would hate to hold ultimately the county makes the decision, but I would hate to hold their hands or, feet to the flame for things that are maybe not necessary. So especially, we've already heard that getting landscape established in this area could require some work and hand watering. I'm wondering if it's necessary to just modify that graphic a little to put it where it needs to be and not have them do work where it doesn't need to be. That might make him more amenable to some other conditions we would request.
Well, I'd also invite the neighbors to plant as much as you want.
Already planted 200 trees.
So we have a motion, we have a second. So we would need to vote on it and approve it or not approve it based on whether or not we think it has enough meat to it, so to speak, enough conditions that satisfy you individually as a group. If it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, then we
Modify.
potentially modify. So I guess I'm going to direct a question to staff. If we have a motion that's seconded, and if it's a tie, or if it is, actually we can't have a tie because there's 7 of us. But if we, more than half of us say no, do we start over?
Mhm.
Okay. I just want to make sure that
Do you have something to add, Jerry?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so that said, any more discussion on this motion that's been seconded? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go down the row and we're going to vote on this motion with those 5 conditions. Jerry?
Aye.
I say,
What was that, Jerry?
It was an aye.
That was an aye.
I'm going to say nay,
Nay?
but not a further discussion, but
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
I say nay. So we are
Back to the beginning.
back to the beginning.
my only go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I was gonna say, the reason that I said nay is that I'm concerned about the fencing not being around the entire thing. And I think the natural buffer until the R zone works all the way out there, I don't think it should be between the Clarks and the unnamed lady who was too old to be here. I think that natural condition, until it gets developed further, it isn't necessary because this proposal isn't going to that portion of the property. Just like I would hate to see the buffer.
You're
go
talking this
all the way-
section here.
Yes,
So
just that
this would
section.
not be required. If there's no development here, this would not require that buffer. It
Oh,
would just terminate at the end and then jog up this way.
so then maybe that's a clarification because
Yeah.
Ivy
No.
and I thought that hatch went all the way across there was that because the property
No,
runs all the way to the other road, that it had to be.
this is just how the site plan came over.
Okay.
It wasn't requested by us to show it in this way. It's just how it was drawn. So it would, essentially the type A would go along this property line here and then down this way. If there's no development here, there's no requirement to buffer
Thank you for
Vacant
that
land.
clarification.
from vacant land.
My heartburn right now is the about 24 spaces that are right over where the old pond used to be. Because if we say yes to this, you could fill it with gravel and still call it detention because the gravel would hold water there, but you're going to park on top of it. And that's where I'm, because that water runs into farm, runs down, and without treatment winds up in Paradise Creek. And we do not divert Paradise Creek, it just goes on to Pullman. And I realize that the solution to pollution is dilution. However, that's a long way.
Well, one thing to consider is that there's no regulation for the University of Idaho for stormwater, whatever they want to do.
Right, and all their
There's no
sheep
regulation
wastes
for
are
the
washing down there
farming.
anyway.
The farmers that surround all this property. So we're talking about just this development.
Right.
And if it's required to have a retention pond, it could be designed so that it wasn't in this area where that on-natural pond is now. It could be designed so it's in a
Different
upstream
location.
from that.
So my only issue is I would go back and vote for Marshall's proposal only, but I'd add us for security fence. It just seems to me a natural thing around a public use with so many different people coming and going. Not only for the protection of the people who have stuff in storage, but also for those, granted, only 2 or 3 families, but they have a legitimate concern about people doing nefarious things.
I agree with that. I also, the whole nuisance thing, and I kind of brought it up originally. I don't know why the front fence has an alarm. I don't know who you're alarming.
Especially
It's
if
not
it's-
an alarm for that, it's alarm so
the
that
back-
you back or go forward to it. So
Okay.
that it tells you that it's currently moving, so that it doesn't close on your vehicle or that you don't move through it.
But
Now,
the
it doesn't
fact
have
that
to be that
once
loud.
you get in there,
Yeah, I was
you
gonna
then
say,
have access
that
to
serves-
drive or walk.
That's a good
wherever.
purpose, but the Durbin family or the Clark family doesn't need to hear it.
Just needs to be loud enough you can hear it there in the vehicle.
But if you look at the west side of the property and like Joe was showing, there's on the west side, they've got storage right up to the road. Vehicles are planning to be stored right up to the road. And I just think that having a fence along there to protect the people, if I had a vehicle there, I'd want it behind a fence. I wouldn't want it just to be sitting there alongside a public road where people are driving by on a regular basis.
Yeah, go ahead.
Amy, in the city of Moscow, is a security fence required?
We just updated our self-storage facility standards. I don't recall if it includes a fence.
I think it does.
It does in certain zoning designations. So
And what zoning designations are those?
I will tell you right now.
Are they within the zones or separating zones?
They're within zones. So self-storage facilities with the requirement for those standards are allowed within R3, R4, RO, neighborhood business. Those all are required to apply these standards. They have to be half acre. There's a setback on the rear and the sides, building orientation of those. So this is more self-contained, like self-storage buildings. The building height's limited to 14 feet, has specific hours of operation, a type landscape buffer is required. Interior vehicle access has 20 feet width. And then there's so outdoor storage, for the storage of personal property outside of enclosed individual bays of self-storage facilities shall be permitted with the exception of RV. So that section doesn't necessarily apply to RV storage or boat storage. RV and boat storage must be located at the interior of the site and shall not be visible from any adjacent properties. So this is all within the city limits, within residential neighborhoods typically. That's what those zoning designations are. R3, R4, those are high density residential. RO is residential office, and the neighborhood business allows for some residential use as well. So it's a little bit different again, because this is within the city limits and you've got neighbors on all sides. Whereas again, this is in the area city impact, so it's a little bit different. We have these standards because of that. There's also requirements for certain lighting, proximity to residents, fencing at the perimeter. But again, those are just within residential uses with limited commercial in the city.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Tim.
Is it conceivable that if it's the desire of the group that there be a fencing consideration, that is a recommendation for the county to consider, since it's not us who are going to make that determination?
Well, unless we feel that there ought to be one. I mean, why?
Right, but it's
Why
not for us
should-
to enforce, right? We don't get to enforce
Well,
that.
no, but I don't think.
No, but we don't get to enforce any of
Any
these
of it, yeah.
recommendations. We're just
A recommendation.
throwing them out there. And I guess my justification, I don't know if Tim thinks it's the same, but if the city finds it a viable thing to fence in the space for safety and visibility, as a city body reviewing this or previewing this for the county body, I don't know why, as this has become a more and more common development, why we wouldn't recommend to the county to utilize the city's.
And also, if we make a
Development.
fencing recommendation, does it replace the type A landscape buffer? Do we need to require them both?
Yeah, it's two different purposes. One's for visual, the other's for security.
Well, yes, but a fence might also, create a visual barrier. I mean, people can still plant vegetation along their property boundaries. The Clarks have planted a couple hundred trees, so they would have a fence plus their trees. But, I'm just throwing it out there.
I look at the fence as a way to keep moose, deer, foxes, coyotes more possibly out of there than I would security of, are drunk frat boys going to go in there and vandalize? Probably not, but
Probably not.
it's probably a protection for wildlife more than it is for humans at this point.
Mhm.
Can I clarify
Yeah.
what I was trying to
Yeah.
ask? So my point was that if this is something that this group feels strongly about, that it becomes a recommendation amended, the motion amended. But as you mentioned, we don't have enforcement of any of these items.
They're just
So we can make
recommendations,
any
yeah.
recommendation we want. And if it's the desire of the group to make that recommendation, let's amend the motion to include that.
Well, let somebody else make the motion. That's what you're inclined to do.
I'll make Marshall's motion with the addition of a 6-foot security fence. Or whatever, what's the standard, Amy? For the,
Within the city, it's 6 feet is the
so
limit, yeah.
a 6-foot security fence.
I don't know that the county has any height restriction. I can't speak to their code without,
Well,
diving
if we're
into it,
making a recommendation from the city, then yeah, we
6
should go
feet.
with the city code.
Yep.
Since it's what
Right.
the area of impact is. So yeah, that's what I would take Marshall's motion with adding the
The fence.
security fence.
So for clarification, that means we have the 4 that the city recommended.
Mhm.
The 5th one that Marshall had with regards to mechanical and fixing stuff, fluids,
Requires
and
a-
requiring oil water separator, and now adding fence for safety and
Perimeter.
security around the perimeter.
I second it.
Perimeter security fence.
So we have a motion, we have a second. I'm gonna start actually, we'll start this in since this is the motion and the second came from that end.
Aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
Marshall.
Aye.
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 Aye. It is unanimous. That motion originally, and as stated, included
Them
that
doing
staff
their-
provide
The
the
rebel, yeah.
recommendations and finding this a fact and such. All right. We are done with that item. Now, that gets us to our 4th item tonight, and that is, if I clarify this for me, Amy, I want to say we have to do this in 2 parts. We review the variance, motion approve, and then we do the
Correct.
conditional, correct? Okay.
yep, correct.
So basically, we have item 4A and 4B.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So let's start with our approval of criteria for the variance. These were kind of like the meeting minute notes. I didn't see any Scribners. Did anybody else have comments or issues that needed to be addressed?
Well, I move that we approve the reason, the statement and relevant criterion standards for the variance on the Nursery Street property.
Second.
Have a motion. I have a second. Let's start at the opposite end.
Aye.
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 Aye. So that was unanimous. So that is done. Now, does anybody have any comments, clarifications with regards to the CUP on Jackson Street?
I move we approve the relevant criteria.
Have a motion as is.
I'll second.
Ivy, we have a second. Again,
Aye.
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 aye. That's unanimous. So we are done with item 4B.
Are we done?
Well, actually, that was item 5. Any other, I know we have a meeting, it's Tuesday at 5:30, is that correct?
Monday.
Or Monday?
Monday.
Monday.
Monday at 5:30?
Jennifer, can I back out of that? Do we still have enough? I can make it if I have to. If you got it. Unless everybody else is going to bail.
I have everybody yes, except no response for MK. I think MK was undecided.
What's that date?
The
Next
4th.
Monday.
Next Monday.
Yeah, I'll be here.
It's at 5:30, just quick.
Are we up here or are we downstairs?
We're up here.
So you're good, you don't have to be
Okay.
here. And you don't have to be.
And I'll be here if I'm not stuck in House Canyon.
Okay.
Well, that would still leave 4 of us for sure.
That's black ink.
Okay,
Black ink.
Are you looking for a motion to adjourn?
I will take one.
I'll make that.
And as you point out, we're all in favor?
Aye.
All right.